You're on fire.
Yeah. Okay. Our third speaker for the day is Mr. James Prieto, Mr. Burning Man. Mr. James is a compassionate communicator coach. He facilitates groups, workshops, and is a published author very recently. He's been attending Toastmasters for a year and a half. He's doing project number 7, the same as Jennifer's, which is researcher topic. And again, the objectives are collect information about your topic from numerous sources, and secondly, carefully support your points and opinions with facts, examples, and illustrations gathered through your research. The title of James's speech is Exploring Our Self-Similarity. Please help me welcome James Prieto.
Thank you, Kendall. So I actually started off with this speech researching fractal geometry, something that I've been intrigued about for some time. It's a little bit different from Euclidean geometry, which is what we study in geometry in high school. And it turns out that fractal is a new branch of science. And it basically came out of, could you change the green light, please? It came out of the study of nature. And so mathematicians found relationships that describe nature a little bit more closely than Euclidean geometry. And as I dove into fractals, I was reminded of this pattern called self-similarity, which is what one of the main patterns that fractals actually display. So have you ever wondered why we seem to be so fascinated with the ocean, with trees, and even snowflakes? So today I'm going to show you what is called self-similarity. It's a universal property it's built into nature, and it seems to be guiding the direction of our conscious evolution. As we learn as a society and we develop ourselves, like in Toastmasters, we're learning how to speak in public. That's an example of, and I'll show you how that ties into with the subject. So we're going to look at fractal geometry, nature, how it shows up in the human body, and also how we behave in integrity. And that displays the pattern of self-similarity. So here's an example of fractal geometry. As you can see by the display here, as you start focusing in on the smaller pattern, it looks very similar to the previous. And so we're really diving in further and further inside, and it looks the same. And very similarly for this particular picture. So mathematically, scientists have found that fractal geometry can be used to describe more accurately the coastlines of maps, the texture of trees, and also, as we'll see, snowflakes. Aren't those beautiful? And so as you look at a snowflake, you see repeating patterns over and over again. So here's a hexagonal shape, and as we go out, there's another hexagon, a hexagon here, and then another here, and as you focus even further down, you see smaller and smaller hexagons. So it's like, wow, there's a really cool pattern in nature that seems to show up. Trees happen to be my personal favorite self-similar pattern in nature. So trees display, actually on the bottom side we don't get to see the roots, but there's a tree underground just as big as a tree above. And within the roots themselves, it displays the same pattern of self-similarity. So the bottom receives nutrients from the soil, and the top gives out oxygen and fruit, if it happens to be a fruit tree. So as we go from the trunk up on the tree, from the roots up to the trunk has other branches that come out, and then other branches which feed into other branches, and finally we get the leaves. And if you follow the leaves, eventually you get to something like that. And I find it interesting, doesn't this remind you of some of the snowflakes we saw earlier? Cool, huh? So we finally make it down to a leaf. So the trunk, the branch kind of comes in here, and it branches out again, and here's a magnification, and you see the vein, you know, just kind of like a trunk, and there are other branches and so on and so forth, down to the cellular level. Amazing stuff. So it turns out that we also have this property in our own bodies. Our circulatory system has a similar tree structure, and it turns out that we have two. The red one gives nutrients to the body, and the blue one receives the waste from the cellular membranes and circulates it all through the heart. And then we also have this incredible nervous system. We have the spinal cord, which is kind of like the tree of the trunk of the tree, and it culminates with the brain, the mind, and the brain is composed of all these little neuron things which have branches, and they're interconnected with each other. Just kind of like a densely packed forest, all inside of our head. And this is a focus of a connectome, a picture of a neuron that kind of looks like a tree too, doesn't it? So we have this self-similar pattern within our bodies themselves. And the brain, I don't know how it happened, but we seem to have developed two sides to our brain that look similar. They have this physical property of self-similarity. But indeed, they actually process information very differently. On the left side, we have the left hemisphere, which processes information like a serial computer. It analyzes, criticizes, it labels things with language. And we essentially make sense out of our world in terms of the labels that we put on the things. On the right hemisphere, on the other hand, it processes information in parallel. We tend to feel insights. We feel creativity. We actually have feelings inside where we are connecting to other human beings and to ourselves. And so up to this point, we've talked about the physical properties of nature, but there are also properties which go beyond the physical properties of nature, which self-similarity actually shows up. I like using the metaphor of the computer. The computer hardware is the physical side of where this stuff shows up, and then we also have the software side. And so we're going to look at the software side a little bit here. Some people will actually call that metaphysical properties. And so integrity is how self-similarity shows up in behavior, how we actually use this information to grow. So we're looking for this self-inner consistency within ourselves. So integrity happens when our outward life is congruent with what we hold dear inside. When the mind actually listens to the heart, it becomes our compass for how we make choices. This is also called our conscience. The mind learns what's going on in the heart through a process called self-empathy. So the mind is actually just focusing in on what we have inside, what's going on in there. And we put labels on it. The mind likes to label things. So we have these words called feelings. And they have a tendency to describe what's going on. And there's also the needs behind them. And the process of self-empathy, or this is called the process of self-empathy and compassionate communication. And so when the heart and mind work together within ourselves, we're honoring this property of self-similarity within us. And as each person becomes self-connected, we start to feel this natural compassion and curiosity. Not only are we understanding ourselves, seeing the truth of our own experience, but now we start to feel curious towards other people. In Matthew 18, Jesus actually talks about this. When people get together in symphoneo, which is Greek for a symphony of mutual understanding, and two or more are gathered, His Spirit is actually in the room. And so, in other words, when we connect, when there is a connection between two people, we get to experience something, a life that wasn't there before, something that is more than the sum of the parts between us. This is also called the Spirit. And so, as this happens within groups of people, hearts and minds united, we begin to experience our common union, also known traditionally as our communion. And every once in a while, we get to taste something a little bit special. And we celebrate that in our tradition as the Feast of Communion. So as we act congruently with our created nature, we are actually behaving in self-similar ways. And this is the thesis of my book, The Joy of Compassionate Connecting. And it really is an invitation to live life to its fullest. We actually get to participate in the process of creation by becoming whole and free. And there really is no conflict in this place. We get to feel this internal peace inside. This property of self-similarity actually guides our collective evolution as we continue to grow ourselves and to grow together as a society. We get to experience love. And this property of self-similarity came out of love because God is love. And to be an active participant in this process of creation is, for me, a glorious opportunity not to be missed. Thank you very much.
That's terrific, James. I feel like I need some